everyone, a very good evening. You're watching The Money Show on ET Now with me, Mubina Kapasi. This is, your daily dose of everything to do with personal finances. And here's what we have lined up today on the show. We are going to be talking about those individuals who have been forced into early retirement. Remember that we are in the midst of the COVID pandemic, which is causing a lot of companies to fall short of cash, to see their profits squeezed. Many of them have gone into losses as well, and hence they as well are forced to take some very, very unfortunate steps, which includes laying off their employees. So have you identified if your company as well is at such a risk, and hence your position at the company to may get redundant? Well, we are going to tell you what are the financial steps you must take. And later on the show, we will be talking about what exactly are you entitled to receive in terms of a severance package, in terms of a retrenchment compensation, whatever term it might be, as per Indian law. So for that, we'll be also bringing on board a noted lawyer from Amarchand Mangaldas to talk about that. So that's what's lined up on the show today. And in just moments from now, we will be joined by Suresh Sadagopan of Ladder7 Financial Advisories. Well, before we do that, we have a small reminder for all our viewers, and that is a very interesting conversation with one of the gurus of the equity markets, Mr. Ruchir Sharma. And he, in fact, has released a book wherein he notes the 10 parameters on the basis of which one should decide whether a nation will, be able to recover from this deadly coronavirus crisis and the problems it's caused for their economy. So let's listen in to a small excerpt of the conversation that ET Now's managing editor Nikunj Dalmia had with Ruchir Sharma.
Yeah, so therefore I think that it is time to relook at emerging markets. I think that I've been quite skeptical of this asset class over the last decade or so, and been speaking about that. But I think that generally places like emerging markets and even Europe are looking much more attractive to me for the next 5 or 10 years, if we can afford to have that patience and that time horizon. And why do I say that? One, I think is very important is the US dollar, that typically these international investments tend to do much better in a weaker dollar environment. I think the dollar has made a very important turning point over the last few months. So the dollar has clearly peaked after an incredible run over the last decade. So I think that that should generally help international investments, global stock markets outside the US do much better in a weaker dollar environment. I think then also the fact that in some of these emerging markets, the valuations are very cheap. And this is possibly the most provocative thing that I will say, which is that, as you know, that I've also been a long-term bear on commodities. And I think that commodities are setting up for a much better decade, given the amount of supply discipline, the rationalization of excess supply that's taken place in the commodities sphere after a very poor decade. So I think that investing in commodities for the first time is looking very attractive to me in many, many years. So that's where you have it. I'd like to put more of my money internationally in emerging markets, and I'm a backer of commodity investments, which are looking so neglected today and so out of fashion.
Okay, well, as you know, on ET Now we have our Get Rich mantra, where we speak to the who's who and the experts of equity markets. So here is noted investor Atul Suri of Marathon Trends PMS on his insights to getting rich.
Markets are a game of probability. If anyone says that, I know that stock that's going to make you rich, believe you me, he's lying, or he's dumb. The fact is that after having spent so many years in the market, this is a game of probabilities. You have a few bets, you be overweight, underweight somewhere, and you ride the trend. That is what I have really learned on. There is no one silver bullet or golden bullet. There is. You just have to keep your risk under control. People think creating wealth is all about picking that one stock or some tip, but it has so many more components. Yes, picking stocks is one bit, but what percentage? How do you allocate? You can be wrong, and you're going to be wrong half the time in this market. Where do you exit? So I think managing a portfolio or creating wealth is a sum total of all these. When you study the biggest investors or the most successful investors, you really get shocked at how the 80-20 principle works. That 80% of the wealth is only created by 20% of the stocks. And it's this ability which really, I think, differentiates, or if there's one such stock idea, or if there's one such strategy, it is this whole 80-20 principle. And repeatedly, you hear George Soros talk about it, all great investors. Even the great Warren Buffett, the biggest wealth creator. Ultimately, you will find that it's concentrated portfolios. In his 90s, maximum wealth he creates in a stock is Apple. Just imagine what this market teaches us.
All right, well, let's now get to the topic at hand, and that is bracing yourself for an imminent case of a job loss, being laid off. And unfortunately, that's really what we are witnessing. Companies as well, starved of cash because of the coronavirus crisis, are being unfortunately forced to take such decisions. So let's bring on board now our guest for today, Mr. Suresh Sadagopan. He's the founder of Ladder7 Financial Advisors. Mr. Sadagopan, thank you for joining us today on ET Now. So to start with, as we've been seeing the news as well, right? Many companies, especially in the aviation pack, in the travel and tourism, entertainment, have unfortunately had to either terminate or suspend their employees' employment contracts, which means going off without pay and no guarantee of when you can return to work. So in such cases, what would you recommend should be step one that an individual should take?
Yeah, so the first thing that we will need to see is that is there an ability to bounce back, and how soon can one bounce back? Like you took the example of aviation industry. It looks like it may take maybe 6 months, a year, maybe slightly more than a year for the travel industry to bounce back. It looks like that. Some of the airlines, even we have clients from the airline industry, some of them are facing a job loss and some of them are facing a job cut, deep salary cut. So in those kind of situations, the primary thing that we can actually bank upon is one's own investments, what one has done. Normally, as financial advisors, what we typically keep is that we have a certain amount of contingency fund. Normally, this is a black swan event. We have never anticipated a COVID event. So there is a certain amount of contingency we would have kept aside, and in most cases that would be enough. But for a very long haul, then we will have to actually dip into the investments that we have done. So now, based on the requirements of that person, the asset allocation would have been done in certain equity funds and certain debt-oriented investments. Probably we can rely more on the debt-oriented investments as opposed to equity, which is a volatile asset class. So that is what we are asking people to look at.
Okay. All right. Yeah, understandably, Mr. Sadagopan. But just want to, go back to the basics first, and that is with respect to essentially how should one manage their debt obligations, and that's really a little more scary to even think of, right? Because many people may be having EMIs, home loan EMIs, credit card bills, etc. to pay off, and now you have income which may have stopped altogether, unless of course some people are fortunate enough to have a second stream of income. That's always a wise thing to do, obviously, a passive income, working for you. But many may not be having that as well. So how would you recommend they go about their debt obligations, and especially if, let's say, the layoff has happened now, because now that moratorium option is also not there?
Yeah, so again, I'll have to come back to the original point that, see, ultimately, if you don't have any investments, then we are going to have a tough time. So there are a lot of people who have some kind of debt going for them. So they are paying certain amount of EMI for maybe a house, for maybe a vehicle, and so on and so forth. So that will have to be kept alive now, and the existing investments are what are going to come in handy for that kind of a thing. I mean, taking another loan, some people are contemplating taking another loan to take care of this kind of situation, which is not really recommended. So ideally, take care of the debt, whatever the debt obligations are from the existing investments, and let us hope that over a period of time they are able to get back to work, the industry itself and the economy, and their situation improves over a period of time, over a period of 6 months to 1 year. So in the intervening period, what we also will ask them to do is to look at the expenses very closely, pare down the expenses to the absolute minimum. They have to also look at whatever goals they may have, other goals which are of discretionary nature. Those goals which can be postponed, like, I mean, at this point in time, vacation is a goal which most people are not going to exercise. Maybe a change of vehicle may be one of the goals which they had thought of at an earlier point in time, but now they would not be probably doing that. So any kind of discretionary goal is something that we have to postpone to a future point in time. So keep the expenses to the minimum. Absolutely necessary goals, necessary expenses and goals like, say, children's education, we will have to go for. All the other things have to be postponed and depend on the existing investments. And if existing investments are not enough, then one's own one's own statutory savings like employee provident fund also one can probably draw upon in a situation where there is a job loss. So those are the things one can depend upon.
Actually, Mr. Sadagopan, I was going to get into that. For the discretionary bits, like for example, upgrading your car or taking a vacation, of course, that can be essentially pushed down the line. There was this article we read about how there's been a huge surge in the withdrawals from provident fund accounts.
Correct.
Now,
Correct.
many people are a little iffy on this because your PF is essentially your nest egg. You want to use it for your retirement. So, would you also advocate discretion before individuals go and start taking out money from their PF, or you think it should be okay up to a certain limit probably?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Mubina. I mean, your point is well taken. This should be seen as last thing that we need to do after exhausting all other viable options. So viable options are our current investments. But if the situation is so bad and they have certain goals coming up which cannot be postponed, and they have been out of a job for quite some time, and their investments, some of the investments can be completely tied up also. Like for example, suppose somebody has invested into real estate. Yes, they have investments but that cannot be unlocked. So there are people like that as well. So in those kind of situations, they have no other option but to probably rely upon the statutory investment, which is basically for retirement funding. But in those kind of situations, I think it's still okay for them to touch upon that as a temporary relief measure.
All right. This is actually a topic that we haven't touched upon so far, and that is insurance. Many a times what happens is that people are in group Mediclaim, with their company. What happens to that Mediclaim if an individual is laid off? And I'm sure you would stress on the importance of maintaining a Mediclaim even after you're laid off, especially since we are in the midst of a health crisis.
Correct. Normally, like you rightly pointed out, we even in the normal situations, we always suggest a personal health insurance policy over and above the employer given policy. Normally that is what we suggest. So if that is not there, anybody who is out of work, they should post haste purchase a medical insurance policy. That's absolutely important. So if they have not done that, they are living life at this point in time without a medical insurance policy. I think they should consider taking one immediately. Medical insurance is the most important thing. Life insurance comes next, but so at least medical insurance has to be taken immediately, because medical insurance, the expenses towards hospitalization can actually bankrupt people. So that's very important to have.
We have been hearing of a lot of scary incidents. I'm sure many of our viewers as well have heard about how hospital bills have been extended to go into lakhs in case of prolonged hospitalization, especially for COVID. And you know, medical insurance can really go a long way in such a situation, especially when, you know, you're unemployed. At that point of time, all the more a medical insurance does come in extremely important and extremely handy.
Right.
Now, Mr. Sadagopan, in India, we don't really have the concept of, you know, some sort of a social security code or anything. But interestingly, in fact, it was just in this parliament session that a social security code was introduced and passed. I guess it still needs the president's assent, and I know it's a little too early for us as well to understand, to produce through that heavy document and understand what it means for us. But yeah, are there any benefits that maybe an individual can draw upon? Sometimes, you know, we are not even aware, but there are certain kind of government schemes that can help individuals.
See, government has been introducing a slew of policies in terms of insurance, accident insurance, and pension policies, etc. So those really cannot be seen as a social security in that sense. Those are low-cost options which are available to the general public, and it is available to a certain extent. So those things are there. As far as the new one that is being introduced in the parliament, even I have not yet studied. It will be a worthwhile thing to do to provide social security to the public at large, at least to the extent that they are not pushed to destitution if they are unemployed. So to that extent, if government of India is able to work on the social security aspect, it will be fine. But like you said, even I will have to go through the whole thing, understand the fine print, and then I'll be in a better position to comment on that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's still too early, and any which ways labor laws can bring about with them their fair share of complexities. By the way, just a note for our viewers: the Social Security Code essentially proposes a national security board, and what it essentially does is this one's important for gig workers too, because it formulates schemes for gig workers. So let's say if you're a blogger or a freelance worker, then I recommend that, the Social Security Code is something that you should read up on. Also, if there are aggregators that are employing gig workers, they will have to contribute 1 to 2% of their total turnover for Social Security. And I think the government's intention is also for Ola, Uber, and these companies that hire the drivers on this gig. On a gig job, as they call it. So I guess it's also intended at them. So I think that's just roughly a part that I wanted to read about, and we will definitely do a more thorough reading on these codes. Okay, well, let's do one thing now. Let's take on board some questions and queries that we have received for you, Mr. Sadagopan, quite a few of them. And remember, folks, you as well can connect with us by writing in on The Money Show at etnow.tv. So let's take on board our very first query. It's coming in from Sanjay Bhaglal. He says, I'm 55 and unemployed. I have 20 lakh rupees in my account. What I would like to know is how to go about managing it, or I think he means investing it, to generate a monthly income post December 2020. So I would reckon that he is more or less sorted for the next 4 odd months, 3 odd months, but he will need a plan for, post that. So I think fairly short-term time horizon to turn this 20 lakh rupees around into something that will generate frequent income. Mr. Sadagopan, what would you recommend? It's, I think, fairly a small amount, and he's just 55. He's not that old.
Correct. So two things actually. So I don't know at this point in time whether Mr. Sanjay currently he's unemployed. I understand that. But whether he has an intention to seek employment, I don't know. But the 20 lakhs which he has in the account can be invested to generate an income. Say about 14 to 15,000 per month is what potentially, 1.4 to 1.5 lakhs is potentially what one can generate as a kind of an income. It's not a very big amount. It's actually a comparatively small amount. I'm not even sure whether this is the amount that he has in all, or is there any other amount. So if this is the amount that he has, and there are no other people in the family, then probably he may have to look for an employment. But because I reckon that this amount may not probably be enough to sustain himself. So one of the good options that I could suggest is some kind of a government of India schemes. He is only 55 years old, so probably he will not qualify for senior citizen scheme and things like that. Post office schemes are going to give a rather low interest rate. One of the other possibilities is a corporate deposit, but it has a certain level of risk. Potentially, instead of 7.5%, 7.5%, one can generate maybe 8%. But it comes with a certain level of risk. So all in all, the amount of money that one can generate from a 20 lakh amount is not very significant to run a family with. So I reckon that probably he would be seeking employment, and that is how he will be taking care of. That is how he will be making the ends meet.
All right, so that's then the recommendation coming in, for Sanjay. It is a small amount, 20 lakh rupees, plus we do not know whether he's going to actively be seeking employment. We don't know if he has other dependents. So the information is a little incomplete. It would have been better if we had some more information. But yeah, this is what it is. And we would recommend looking for another source of income, because 20 lakh rupees in India to sustain you for the next 30 years is not going to cut it. You perhaps are going to see it fall short, Okay, let's move on and take on board our next question. It's coming in from Rima Raikwar. She says, I've lost my job and I have just 1 lakh rupees in my provident fund. I've utilized my savings over 3 months. So I think 3 months worth of savings is already utilized. But she has a liability. She's got an EMI of 27 grand per month, and she also has her other expenses to sustain herself. That's another 20,000 rupees. So I guess it's obvious that Rima is struggling at this point of time to look for a job, because obviously this 1 lakh rupees will be over in 2 months just paying her EMIs and her expenses. Correct. She's already burned through 3 months of expenses. So, but yeah, apart from that, any recommendation you'd have for Rima? The amount is too low, but still, what would you recommend?
Yeah, there is nothing one can recommend at this point in time, because the amount is, like you rightly pointed out, this is going to get exhausted in a matter of 2 months. So I cannot even suggest that she invest this amount somewhere. So it will be required for her in the immediate future. So the only, we don't again know Rima's situation. If there are other people in the family who are also earning a income, so that is one, that will be a plus. The other thing is, if she has the potential to get a job in the near future, that can help. But apart from that, for the life of me, I'm not able to think anything which can directly help Rima with given this bit of information.
Yeah. It's a little tricky. The information is a little incomplete. Rima, to all our viewers, if you could just share a little more information, it would help. And you know that 1 lakh rupees, even if you will invest it, you'll probably have to liquidate it soon, very, very soon, in fact, because you will have to pay for your 27 grand EMI and 20 grand expenses. So it's going to be very tricky. And I think obviously the advice is just get a job as soon as you can. In fact, I remember that back in July when I had conducted a conversation with team leads and with a career counselor, their advice as well was that, look, at this point of time, don't be picky about, about the job that you get, because we are in the midst of an economic crisis. Take the job that you are offered. And then once you're, probably a period has passed, this crisis has passed, then you can perhaps look to converting your vocation into avocation. But at this point of time, you yourself are in a bit of a crisis, right? So just take the job that you get, and you can, of course, look to pursue your avocation a little later. Well, Mr. Sadagopan, that's all the time we have. So many thanks for joining us today on ET Now. We really appreciate you giving us and helping our viewers out as well with their questions and queries, sir. Okay, well, on that note, we'll take a very short break right here on the show. But when we return, we will be summarizing those 3 labor laws for our viewers. What exactly do they mean? And also bringing on board eminent labor law expert Pooja Ramchandani to talk about what exactly can employees expect in terms of compensation from their employers if they are laid off. Don't go anywhere.